September 12, 1942. 2:07 a.m. Mid-Atlantic, 600 miles from any coastline. Werner Hartenstein grips the railing of U-156's conning tower, staring at something that shouldn't exist in these waters. Bodies. Hundreds of them, thrashing in the oil-slick darkness. Men screaming in Italian. Women clutching children. The torpedo he fired 4 hours ago had hit its target perfectly, a 20,000-ton British transport. But his orders never mentioned this. The ship wasn't carrying troops or weapons. It was carrying prisoners. Families. And now 1,500 souls are drowning because of him. He reaches for the radio to report what he's found, then stops. Broadcasting his position would be suicide. Every Allied warship and aircraft within 500 miles would converge on this exact spot. His crew expects him to dive. International law expects him to dive. But the screaming doesn't stop. And Werner Hartenstein is about to do something no U-boat commander has done in this entire war, something so insane that when Berlin hears about it, they'll either court-martial him or pretend it never happened. He gives the order that will change everything: surface fully. Prepare to take on survivors. This is the story of the Laconia Incident, a night when the rules of submarine warfare shattered, when enemies became rescuers, and when one decision aboard a single U-boat triggered a chain reaction that would kill thousands more in the years that followed. You think you know World War II. You think you understand what happened beneath the waves. But what happened in these 48 hours rewrote the entire war at sea, and most people have never heard a single word about it. By the end of this video, you'll understand why one act of mercy became the reason mercy died in submarine warfare forever. Werner Hartenstein wasn't supposed to be the kind of man who breaks rules. Born in 1908 in a small Bavarian village where everyone knew everyone's business, Werner grew up in the kind of household where military discipline wasn't taught, it was simply assumed. His father had served in the Imperial Navy. His grandfather had fought in the Franco-Prussian War. Dinner table conversations revolved around duty, sacrifice, and the unspoken understanding that when your country called, you answered without question. Werner absorbed these lessons the way other children absorbed fairy tales. By age 12, he could disassemble and reassemble a rifle faster than most adults. By 16, he'd memorized every major naval battle of the previous century. But there was something else about Werner, something that set him apart from the other young men in his village who marched in straight lines and shouted slogans with mechanical precision. He asked questions. Not rebellious questions, not the kind that challenged authority for the sake of it. But genuine, thoughtful questions about why certain orders existed, what purpose they served, whether they made sense in every situation. His commanding officers during training noticed this quality. Some found it troubling. Others recognized it as the mark of someone who wouldn't just follow orders blindly but would understand them deeply enough to execute them brilliantly. Which kind of officer would Werner become? He joined the Reichsmarine in 1928, just as Germany was secretly rebuilding its submarine fleet in violation of the Treaty of Versailles. The submarines weren't called submarines yet, they were underwater research vessels, or experimental diving boats, bureaucratic camouflage for a weapon everyone knew would return. Werner excelled in every aspect of submarine training except one: he struggled with the psychological isolation. Most submariners loved the enclosed world of a U-boat, the way it became a complete universe unto itself once the hatches sealed. Werner found it suffocating. He needed to see the sky. He needed to know what was happening on the surface. This wasn't fear, he'd proven his courage a dozen times over. It was something else. A need to remain connected to the larger picture, to understand context, to see the faces of the people his actions affected. His superiors noted this in his file: excellent technical skills. Natural leader. Perhaps too empathetic for extended submarine command. They assigned him to surface vessels instead. He served on destroyers and cruisers throughout the 1930s, watching as Germany's navy grew from a forbidden memory into a formidable force. He earned promotions steadily, married a schoolteacher named Sophie, had 2 daughters. He was, by every measure, a model officer. But he never forgot that evaluation, too empathetic. He'd wondered then whether they meant it as criticism or warning. Would he ever find out? When the war began in 1939, everything changed. Germany needed submarine commanders desperately, experienced officers who could think independently, who wouldn't panic in the crushing depths, who could make split-second decisions that meant the difference between sinking an enemy convoy and becoming a metal coffin on the ocean floor. Werner's earlier weakness suddenly looked like versatility. They reassigned him to U-boats. By 1940, he had his own command, U-156, a Type IXC submarine, one of the largest, most capable U-boats in the German fleet. It could dive to 200 meters, stay at sea for weeks, strike from distances that made defense almost impossible. Werner proved he could do everything the Navy asked. He sank British merchant ships. He disrupted Allied supply lines. He followed orders without hesitation. But that earlier evaluation still haunted him, tucked away in some filing cabinet in Berlin. Too empathetic. Now, 2 years into commanding U-156, Werner had developed a reputation among his crew. He was thorough, methodical, demanding. He ran drills constantly. He insisted on procedures even when they seemed excessive. But he also knew every crew member's name, asked about their families, listened when they had concerns. His men respected him not because he was harsh but because he was competent, and because they sensed that he actually cared whether they made it home. In the brutal arithmetic of submarine warfare, where one mistake could kill everyone aboard in seconds, that kind of commander was worth following into hell. But caring had costs. After every ship Werner torpedoed, he thought about the men in the water, the ones who didn't make it to lifeboats. He followed the rules of war strictly, never fired on lifeboats, never machine gun survivors, but he couldn't stop imagining their final moments. Sophie noticed it when he came home on leave. He was quieter. More distant. She asked if he was all right. He said yes, of course, it's just the stress of command. But they both knew it was something else. What neither of them knew was that Werner's empathy, that quality his superiors once considered a flaw, was about to face its ultimate test. And depending on how he responded, it might save hundreds of lives or doom thousands more who hadn't even been born yet. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. September 1942. The Atlantic has become a graveyard. U-156 patrols the waters west of Africa, part of a larger operation to intercept Allied convoys supplying troops in North Africa. The mathematics of submarine warfare are simple and brutal: spot a convoy, radio its position to other U-boats, coordinate a wolf pack attack, sink as many ships as possible before escorts drive you under. Werner has done this successfully a dozen times. His crew moves with practiced efficiency. They know the sounds of different ship engines. They can estimate tonnage from periscope observations. They understand the rhythms of war, long hours of tedious patrol punctuated by minutes of controlled chaos when they fire torpedoes and dive deep while depth charges explode around them. This is their normal. This is what they expect. But something is about to shatter that normalcy in ways none of them can possibly anticipate. The orders for this patrol came directly from U-boat headquarters: intercept and destroy targets of opportunity in grid reference FS-43, approximately 500 miles north of Ascension Island. No specific targets mentioned. Just a sector, a mission duration, and the usual reminder that British convoys had been spotted in the area. Werner studied the charts before departing. The area was remote, far from major shipping lanes but close enough to the African coast that occasional transports passed through. He calculated fuel, torpedoes, provisions. Everything seemed routine. His crew loaded aboard, hatches sealed, and U-156 slipped beneath the surface to begin another hunt. What Werner didn't know, what nobody in German naval intelligence knew, was that one particular ship was about to enter his patrol zone. A ship whose sinking would trigger consequences nobody could predict. That ship was the RMS Laconia. On paper, the Laconia looked like any other British transport, 20,000 tons, built in the 1920s, converted for wartime service. Intelligence reports identified it as a troopship, probably carrying soldiers or supplies to reinforce British positions in Egypt. The information was partially correct. The Laconia was indeed British. It was indeed carrying military personnel. But intelligence reports often simplify reality, and reality is always more complicated than paperwork suggests. The full truth about the Laconia's cargo was known to only a handful of officers in the British Admiralty, and they had made the deliberate choice not to broadcast that information too widely. Why? Because the truth was sensitive, potentially embarrassing, and definitely complicated. The Laconia wasn't just carrying British troops. It was carrying Italian prisoners of war, 1,500 of them, captured during the North Africa campaign and being transported to POW camps in the Americas. And it was carrying their families, women, children, civilians who'd been living in Italian East Africa when the British conquered it. More than 2,700 people total, crammed into a ship designed for 2,000. Many prisoners kept below decks in converted cargo holds. Minimal life jackets. Inadequate lifeboats. All standard procedure for transporting enemy POWs, all technically legal under international law, all absolutely catastrophic if something went wrong. But why should anything go wrong? The Laconia traveled with an escort. It zigzagged unpredictably to avoid submarine attacks. It maintained radio silence. British planners considered it safe enough. After all, the chances of a single U-boat finding one specific ship in millions of square miles of empty ocean were astronomically low. What they didn't account for was that Werner Hartenstein wasn't just skilled, he was lucky. Or perhaps unlucky, depending on your perspective. Because on September 12, 1942, at approximately 8 p.m., Werner was scanning the horizon through his periscope when he spotted something, smoke on the horizon. A large ship, traveling alone, no visible escorts. Exactly the kind of target his orders specified that he called his crew to battle stations. They'd done this 100 times. Calculate the target's speed and heading. Position the U-boat for an optimal firing solution. Wait for the target to enter range. Then fire, dive deep, and wait to hear the explosions. Simple. Routine. Mechanical. Werner tracked the target for 2 hours, closing distance, refining his calculations. The ship was large, probably 15,000 to 20,000 tons based on its profile. Definitely military or cargo, given its size and the fact it traveled without lights in a war zone. Through the periscope, Werner could see it clearly now, a big transport, exactly the kind of ship that could be carrying troops or supplies that would kill German soldiers if it reached its destination. He checked his calculations one final time. Perfect angle. Perfect range. He gave the order calmly, the way he'd given it many times before, torpedo los. 2 torpedoes leaped from U-156S tubes, running hot and straight through the dark water. Werner counted seconds. His crew waited in silence. They knew what came next, the explosion, the controlled chaos as they dove to avoid counterattack, the satisfaction of a confirmed kill. Standard procedure. Another successful patrol. But what they couldn't see, what Werner couldn't possibly know from his limited view through the periscope, was what was happening inside the ship he'd just hit. The torpedoes struck the Laconia's port side at 8:07 p.m., exactly where Werner aimed them. The explosions tore through the hull, ripping open compartments below the waterline. Water flooded in with the force of a tsunami. The ship listed immediately, severely, terrifyingly fast. Emergency lights flickered. Alarms screamed. And in the cargo holds where 1,500 Italian prisoners were confined, locked behind barred doors, the nightmare began. Imagine you're in a metal cage below the waterline of a sinking ship. Water pours in, not slowly, but in roaring torrents that fill the space in seconds. You grab the bars, screaming for someone to unlock the door. You hear others screaming too, dozens of voices blending into one desperate chorus. The ship tilts. The water rises to your knees, your waist, your chest. Someone finds a key. Someone opens the door. You push forward with 100 other men, all trying to reach the stairs that lead up to the deck, to air, to life. But the stairs are narrow. The ship is listing. People fall. You climb over them because stopping means dying. You reach the deck and realize the lifeboats are already launching, not enough of them, never enough of them. You see women and children getting priority, which is right, which is proper, but it means you're staying behind. You see men jumping into the water from heights that will break bones if they hit wrong. You look at the ocean, dark, cold, vast, and you realize something terrible: you can't swim. Many Italian soldiers couldn't swim. Swimming wasn't part of their training. And now they had a choice: stay on a sinking ship or jump into water that would kill them just as certainly. What would you do? Werner heard the explosions through U-150's excess hull. Confirmed hits. The crew allowed themselves brief smiles. Another successful attack. Werner ordered the U-boat to periscope depth so he could observe the target's fate, standard procedure, both to confirm the kill and to watch for escort vessels that might counterattack. He raised the periscope and looked. The target was sinking, listing badly to port, clearly doomed. But something was wrong. Something Werner had never seen before in all his previous attacks. The water around the dying ship was full of people. Not just full, absolutely packed with struggling figures, hundreds of them, maybe 1,000. And he could hear them. Through the periscope, through the water, through the steel hull of his submarine, he could hear screaming. Not the usual chaos of a sinking ship, this was different. This was the sound of mass panic, of people who knew they were dying. And then Werner heard something that made his blood freeze: children crying. Women pleading in languages he didn't immediately recognize. This wasn't a military transport. Or if it was carrying far more than soldiers. What had he just sunk? He ordered U-156 to surface, a dangerous decision because any British ships in the area would rush to help survivors, and a surfaced U-boat was vulnerable to ramming or gunfire. But Werner needed to see clearly, needed to understand what was happening. The U-boat broke through the waves, diesel engines roaring to life. Werner climbed to the conning tower, binoculars in hand, and looked at the scene before him. The Laconia was sinking fast, its stern already underwater, bow rising at an impossible angle. Lifeboats were in the water, but not nearly enough. And everywhere, were people. Clinging to debris. Holding each other in the water. Drowning in oil and darkness. Werner watched a lifeboat capsize, spilling its occupants into the sea. He watched a group of men trying to swim toward a piece of wreckage, their movements growing weaker with each second. He watched a woman holding a child above the waves, her face a mask of desperation. And he realized something that would haunt him for the rest of his life: he had done this. He had followed his orders perfectly, executed his mission flawlessly, and created this hell. His radio operator came to the conning tower. "Sir, we're picking up transmissions from the target. It's identifying itself as RMS Laconia, British transport. But they're also broadcasting that they have Italian POWs aboard. Over 1,500 of them. Plus British military personnel and civilians." Werner stared at the radio operator. Italian POWs. Prisoners of war. Technically enemies, but also technically non-combatants under the Geneva Convention. And not just prisoners, families, civilians, people who had no role in combat. People who were on that ship not by choice but by capture. And now they were dying because Werner had done his job correctly. The irony was almost unbearable. He'd sunk a British ship, yes. He'd struck a blow against Britain's ability to move personnel, yes. But he'd also just killed possibly 1,500 Italians, Germany's own allies. The people his country was supposedly fighting alongside. What do you do when you realize your victory is also your catastrophe? Werner made his decision in seconds, though it felt like hours. He would rescue them. All of them. As many as possible. It violated every protocol. It endangered his crew. It revealed his position to any Allied forces in the area. It was, by every measure of submarine warfare, insane. But Werner looked at those people in the water, people who were there because of him, and he couldn't dive. He couldn't leave them. Maybe his superiors were right. Maybe he was too empathetic for submarine command. But empathy was about to become action, and action was about to become legend. He turned to his crew and gave orders that would change naval warfare forever. But first, they had to figure out how a submarine designed to kill ships could possibly save nearly 2,000 people from drowning in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. How do you solve that problem? And what happens when you try? 2:15 a.m. The Laconia's stern has vanished beneath the waves. Her bow points at the stars like a finger accusing heaven. Werner Hartenstein stands on U-156's conning tower, watching 1,500 people fight for their lives in water that will kill them through hypothermia in less than 6 hours. His crew stares at him, waiting for orders that make sense. Because nothing about this situation makes sense. A submarine isn't a rescue vessel. U-156 has space for maybe 60 people if they packed in like sardines. There are 1,500 souls out there. Basic mathematics says this is impossible. But Werner has never been good at accepting impossible. Prepare to take survivors aboard, he orders. Start with the wounded. Women and children first. Bring anyone who can't stay in the water another hour. His executive officer, Mannesmann, stares at him. Sir, we can't. I know we can't save them all, Werner cuts him off. But we can save some. And we can organize the ones we can't fit aboard. Get them into lifeboats. Distribute our medical supplies. We have food, water, blankets, get it all on deck. Move. The crew springs into action because that's what crews do, even when the orders seem crazy. They start hauling survivors from the water, exhausted men, terrified women clutching children, wounded sailors bleeding from shrapnel injuries. Each person pulled aboard means one more success and one less space. The submarine's deck becomes crowded, then dangerously packed, then so full that crew members can barely move. People sit on the gun platform, squeeze into the conning tower, line the narrow walkways. Werner counts 50, 60, 70 people aboard. U-156 sits lower in the water now, sluggish, vulnerable. If they had to dive suddenly, if an aircraft appeared or a warship came hunting, everyone on deck would die. The submarine would probably die too, unable to dive properly with this much weight. But Werner doesn't stop. He can't stop. Because the screaming hasn't stopped that he sees a man in the water, clearly Italian based on his uniform, supporting a woman who's unconscious. The man is exhausted, barely keeping both their heads above water. Werner's crew reaches down with hooked poles, grabbing the woman, pulling her aboard. The Italian man tries to help push her up, uses his last strength, then starts to slip under himself. A German sailor named Klaus leans far over the side, too far, dangerously far, and grabs the Italian's wrist. For a second it looks like both of them will fall in. Then other hands grab Klaus, and they pull together, and suddenly the Italian is on deck too, gasping, coughing up seawater, looking around at the German sailors who just saved him with an expression of complete confusion. Because this shouldn't be happening. Germans and Italians are allies, yes, but submarine warfare doesn't include rescue operations. Submarines hunt and kill. They don't stop to help. Yet here they are. Why? Werner knows why, even if he can't explain it in words that would satisfy a military tribunal. He's looking at human beings dying, and he has the power to prevent some of those deaths, so he's preventing them. The calculation really is that simple. But simplicity doesn't mean easy. Because now he faces a new problem: there are still over 1,000 people in the water, and U-156 is already at capacity. He needs help. He needs other vessels. He needs... Werner stops mid-thought. A crazy idea forms. An idea so insane it might actually work. Or it might get everyone killed. Hard to say which. Radio room, he calls down the hatch. Send a message in plain language, English, German, Italian, whatever frequencies you can access. Here's what I want you to broadcast: if any ship will assist the shipwrecked Laconia crew, I will not attack her. German submarine. Sign it with our boat number. The radio operator's voice comes back, uncertain: "Sir, that reveals our position to every Allied ship and aircraft in the region. They'll send everything they have." "I know," Werner says. "Send it anyway. And keep sending it every 15 minutes. This is the moment where everything changes. Because Werner isn't just rescuing survivors now, he's broadcasting his presence, his vulnerability, his exact location to an enemy that has spent years trying to kill him. He's trusting that whoever receives his message will understand what he's offering: a truce, temporary, specific to this situation, based on nothing but the mutual recognition that some things matter more than winning. It's naive. It's idealistic. It's completely contrary to everything about submarine warfare. But Werner sends the message anyway, because what's the alternative? Watch 1,500 people drown while he does nothing. That's not war. That's something else. Something he can't participate in. The message goes out. Radio waves carrying Werner's surrender of tactical advantage spread in all directions at the speed of light. Somewhere out there, British radio operators hear it. American ships pick it up. Allied commanders in London and Washington receive reports of a German U-boat commander publicly announcing his position and promising not to attack rescue ships. The initial reaction is predictable: it's a trap. It has to be a trap. Germans don't help Allied survivors. They certainly don't broadcast their position and promise to play nice. This must be some kind of ruse to lure ships into an ambush. But some of those commanders are reading the message more carefully. It doesn't say, Allied ships. It says, any ship. And it specifically mentions the Laconia by name. The British Navy knows the Laconia is out there. They know it's carrying POWs. If this message is genuine, if a German U-boat really is trying to rescue 1,500 Italian prisoners, then somebody needs to help. But who would take that risk? Who would sail directly toward a German submarine based on nothing but a radio promise? While Werner waits for responses, his crew continues working. They've pulled 90 people aboard now. U-156 wallows in the water like a pregnant whale. The remaining survivors are in slightly better shape. They're organized into groups, clustered around lifeboats, holding on to debris in formations that conserve energy. German sailors distribute what supplies they can reach over the side: water containers, food packages, blankets. One sailor throws his own jacket to a shivering child in a lifeboat. Another lowers a rope with medical supplies tied to the end. These are small gestures, tiny amounts of help in the face of massive catastrophe. But they matter. Werner sees the difference on people's faces, the shift from pure panic to something like hope. Not rescue yet, but the possibility of rescue. The belief that somebody is trying. Sometimes belief is enough to keep people alive long enough for help to actually arrive. Dawn comes. The sun rises over a scene that belongs in a painting: a German U-boat surrounded by lifeboats, covered in survivors, floating in water still littered with debris and bodies from the Laconia's sinking. Werner hasn't slept. His crew hasn't slept. They're running on adrenaline and willpower and the simple fact that people still need help. The radio crackles. A response. French ships from Dakar are en route. ETA approximately 30 hours. Vichy French, technically neutral, technically cooperating with Germany, but also willing to rescue survivors regardless of nationality. Werner allows himself a moment of relief. Help is coming. Not fast enough, but it's coming. He calculates, 30 hours in the water. People can survive that if they stay organized, stay calm, conserve energy. He broadcasts updates to the survivors, help is coming, hold on, you're going to make it. He doesn't know if they believe him. Hell, he doesn't know if he believes himself. But you say the words because the alternative is silence, and silence in this situation means giving up. Then another radio message. This one makes Werner's blood run cold. It's from U-boat headquarters, from Admiral Donitz himself. The message is brief, official, and absolutely clear: cease rescue operations immediately. No further assistance to be given. Resume patrol. Werner reads it 3 times. Orders. Direct orders from the commander of the entire U-boat fleet. The man whose strategy is sinking Allied shipping faster than they can replace it. The man who expects instant obedience from every U-boat captain under his command. And he's ordering Werner to abandon the rescue, to leave these people in the water, to let them die. What do you do when direct orders conflict with your conscience? What do you do when the rule book says one thing and your gut says another? Werner folds the message carefully. He looks at the 90 people crammed onto his submarine's deck. He looks at the lifeboats full of survivors still waiting for rescue. He thinks about his wife Sophie, about his daughters, about the kind of man he wants to be when he finally gets home. Then he picks up the radio microphone and sends his response, unable to comply. Rescue operations continuing. Will resume patrol when French ships arrive. It's the most insubordinate thing he's done in his entire military career. He's directly refusing orders from his superior officer. In wartime. The penalty for this could be court-martial, execution, disgrace for his entire family. But Werner has made his decision. He's not leaving these people to die. Not when he's the reason they're dying in the first place. Let Berlin deal with the consequences later. Right now, there's work to do. His crew hears his response. They understand what it means. And not a single one of them protests. Years later, some will say that was the moment they truly understood what kind of commander they served under. Not the kind who follows rules blindly, but the kind who understands which rules exist to serve humanity and which rules have forgotten what humanity means. They get back to work. More water distributed. More wounded treated with their limited medical supplies. More encouragement shouted across the waves to people who are starting to believe they might actually survive this nightmare. Hours pass. The sun climbs higher. September in the South Atlantic means relatively warm water, which is good. Hypothermia isn't killing people as fast as it would in northern waters. But dehydration is a problem. Exhaustion is a problem. Despair is a problem. Werner broadcasts updates every hour: help is coming, 26 hours now, you're going to make it, hold on. He's become a lighthouse in human form, a fixed point of hope in a chaotic sea. But hope has enemies. September 13th, 11 a.m. A crew member spots it first: aircraft, approaching from the northeast. British markings. Werner's heart sinks. He's been broadcasting his position for nearly 9 hours. Of course the British found him. Of course they're sending planes. He could dive. He could save his submarine and his crew. But diving means abandoning the 90 people on his deck, means leaving the lifeboats without guidance, means breaking his promise. He doesn't dive. Instead, he does something even crazier. He orders a massive Red Cross flag prepared, technically against regulations because U-boats aren't hospital ships, but desperate times require improvisation. His crew spreads it across U-156's deck, visible from the air. Werner broadcasts in English on emergency frequencies: German submarine conducting rescue operations under international law. Request permission to complete rescue without attack. It's a prayer disguised as a military message. Please see what we're doing here. Please understand. Please don't make me choose between saving these people and saving my crew. The British aircraft circles. Werner watches through binoculars. It's a B-24 Liberator, American-made, British piloted, carrying enough depth charges to shatter U-156 into fragments. The pilot must see the red cross. Must see the people crowded on the deck. Must see the lifeboats tethered to the submarine. Must understand this isn't a combat situation. Right? The aircraft circles again. Lower this time. Werner can see the pilot's face. Young man, probably not much older than 25. They make eye contact across the distance, German U-boat commander and British pilot, two men whose job is to kill each other, locked in a moment where neither knows what happens next. Then the aircraft wings waggle. The international signal for message received. It climbs, circles once more, and flies away. Werner releases a breath he didn't know he was holding. The pilot understood. The pilot showed mercy. For a moment, just a moment, the war paused. But moments don't last. 30 minutes later, another aircraft. This one doesn't circle. It comes in low and fast, and Werner sees the bomb bay doors opening. Dive! Dive! Dive, he screams, but there isn't time. 90 people are on deck. The hatches are open. They can't dive without killing everyone topside. Werner freezes. The aircraft releases. Depth charges fall, spinning through the air, heading directly toward U-156's hull. This is it. This is where the rescue ends. This is where they all die together, German sailors, Italian prisoners, British civilians, all united in death because one pilot decided orders matter more than mercy. What would you do in that instant? Would you pray? Would you curse? Would you think about your family? Werner does all three. The depth charges hit the water. And explode 40 meters away. Not a miss. A deliberate near miss. Close enough to send a message, I could have killed you but I didn't. Far enough to avoid casualties. Werner stares at the water still churning from the explosions. What just happened? Why would a pilot drop bombs deliberately off target? Later, historians will debate this moment. Some say the pilot recognized the Red Cross and deliberately missed. Some say it was bad aim. Some say the pilot had orders to attack any submarine but couldn't bring himself to kill obvious rescue operations. The truth probably died with that pilot. But Werner doesn't have time to analyze it. Because the near miss created a new problem, panic. The survivors on deck are terrified. The people in lifeboats are cutting themselves free, trying to row away from the submarine that just became a target. They're scattering, and if they scatter too far, the French ships won't find them. Werner needs to regain control, needs to reorganize, needs to convince these people that staying near the U-boat is still their best chance. Listen to me, he shouts in German, then Italian, then broken English. French ships are coming. 16 hours. If you scatter now, they won't find you. Stay together. Stay close. It's unclear how much anyone understands. Fear overwhelms language. But his crew starts echoing the message, shouting it in whatever languages they know, using hand gestures when words fail. Slowly, gradually, the panic subsides. Lifeboats stop rowing away. People stay clustered. The formation holds. But Werner makes a hard decision, he can't keep all 90 people on deck. It's too dangerous, for them and for his crew. He starts transferring people to the more stable lifeboats, organizing them into groups, assigning the healthiest survivors as leaders for each boat. It's triage. It's ruthless efficiency disguised as compassion. But it's necessary. If they want anyone to survive, they need structure. For the next 10 hours, U-156 operates as a floating command center. Werner coordinates the lifeboats, keeps them organized in a search pattern that maximizes their visibility, distributes the last of his supplies. His submarine is no longer a weapon of war, it's become something else entirely. A hospital ship. A supply depot. A beacon of hope. His crew works without complaint, though they're exhausted beyond measure. They understand something profound has shifted. This isn't about Germany winning anymore, or Britain losing, or Italy's role in the war. This is about something older than nations, people helping people, because that's what humans do when confronted with unnecessary death. The war will resume tomorrow. But today, in this small pocket of ocean, the war has paused. And in that pause, something beautiful is happening. Midnight. September 14th, Werner spots lights on the horizon. Ships. Multiple ships. The French rescue vessels have arrived, 4 hours earlier than promised. He broadcasts their position, guides them in, watches as professional rescue crews take over the operation he's been running for 20 hours straight. Lifeboats are hauled aboard. Survivors are given blankets, hot food, medical care. Werner's crew helps transfer the people from U-156's deck, carefully, one at a time, making sure nobody falls into the water during the final transfer. The French captain radios Werner directly, "Thank you for preserving these lives. This will not be forgotten." Werner doesn't know how to respond. Thank you for what? For sinking the ship in the first place? For accidentally creating the catastrophe he then tried to fix? He settles for a simple acknowledgement, glad to help. Good luck. Professional. Brief. Hiding everything he actually feels. By 2 a.m., it's done. All the survivors Werner could save are now aboard French ships. U-156's deck is empty, just German crew members now, exhausted, staring at the departing rescue vessels. They saved 771 people. Exact count. Nearly half of those who were in the water. But over 1,500 people died in the sinking or the hours afterward, drowned, killed by hypothermia, dying from injuries before rescue arrived. Werner does the mathematics automatically, the way submarine commanders do, 771 saved versus 1,500 dead. A 34% success rate. By any reasonable standard, he performed a miracle. By his own standard, he failed to save nearly 2/3 of the people his torpedo put in the water. Which number should define him? Which number matters more? He gives the order quietly, clear the deck. Secure for diving. Resume patrol. His crew moves slowly, mechanically, following procedures they could do in their sleep. The hatches seal. The vents open. U-156 slips beneath the waves, returning to its natural habitat in the dark depths where submarines hunt and hide. But Werner knows, his crew knows, they'll never be quite the same. You don't participate in something like that and remain unchanged. They've seen what happens when the rules of war collide with basic humanity. They've made a choice about which one matters more. And now they have to live with the consequences. But what consequences exactly? That part hasn't been written yet. The radio message arrives 3 days later, coded, marked urgent, direct from Admiral Donitz himself. Werner decodes it in his tiny captain's cabin, away from the crew. The message is short: return to base immediately for debriefing. All logs and reports to be submitted upon arrival. No discussion of recent operations with crew or other vessels. That's all. No praise. No condemnation. Just the bureaucratic coldness of return to base. Werner knows what that means. He's either going to be court-martialed or they're going to pretend the Laconia rescue never happened. Possibly both. He folds the message, places it in his log, and sets course for Lorient, France, the massive U-boat base that's become the nerve center of Germany's submarine operations. The journey takes 12 days. 12 days of routine patrol, routine watches, routine maintenance. His crew doesn't ask questions, but they know something's coming. You don't disobey direct orders from headquarters without consequences. They prepare themselves for the worst, their commander arrested, themselves reassigned, U-156 given to someone who follows rules more carefully. They arrive at Lorya on September 28. The base looks exactly as they left it, grey concrete bunkers, forest of periscopes, crews moving between submarines with practiced efficiency. But something feels different. Other U-boat crews aren't looking at them normally. There are stares, whispers, a sense that U-156 has become famous for something, though nobody's saying what. Werner disembarks, expecting MPs to arrest him immediately. Instead, an aide appears, Captain Hartenstein, Admiral Donitz will see you now. Not, you're under arrest. Just, the Admiral will see you. Werner isn't sure if that's better or worse. Donitz's office is Spartan, functional, decorated only with maps showing the positions of every German U-boat in the Atlantic. The Admiral sits behind his desk, reading Werner's full report, 40 pages detailing every decision from the initial torpedo launch through the final rescue. He doesn't look up when Werner enters, doesn't acknowledge his presence for a full minute. Just reads. Finally, he sets the report down and looks directly at Werner with an expression that's impossible to interpret. Anger? Disappointment? Exhaustion? All three. You disobeyed direct orders, Donitz says. Statement, not question. Yes, sir. You revealed your position to the enemy for nearly 24 hours. Yes, sir. You endangered your boat, your crew, and the entire patrol operation to rescue enemy personnel. Italian personnel, sir. Our allies. Italian prisoners of war who were no longer combatants and therefore no longer our concern. Donitz leans back. Do you understand what you've done, Hartenstein? Do you comprehend the implications? Werner stays silent because he doesn't know if this is rhetorical or genuine. Donitz continues, you saved 771 people. That's in your report. What's not in your report is what happened because you saved them. 3 days after you began rescue operations, the British Admiralty issued new guidance to all Allied ships. German U-boats are not to be trusted under any circumstances, even when claiming rescue operations. Any U-boat found on the surface is to be attacked immediately, regardless of visible survivors. Do you know what that means? Werner feels something cold forming in his stomach. It means, Donitz says slowly, that your act of mercy has officially ended the possibility of mercy in submarine warfare. Before your rescue, there was at least theoretical space for humanitarian exceptions, for moments where both sides acknowledged some rules matter more than winning. Now that space is gone. You closed it. Every survivor of every sinking from this point forward will die in the water because no U-boat captain will dare risk what you risked. The British made sure of that when they tried to kill you despite the obvious rescue operation. And I'm making sure of it now. He pulls out a typed document, officially marked, already distributed. Werner recognizes it immediately, the Laconia order. He's heard rumors about it but hasn't seen the actual text until this moment. He reads. No attempt of any kind must be made to rescue members of ships sunk. Rescue runs counter to the elementary demands of warfare for the destruction of enemy ships and crews. Be harsh. Remember that the enemy takes no regard of women and children in his bombing attacks on German cities. It's signed by Donitz. Distributed to every U-boat in the fleet. Effective immediately. Official policy, let them drown. Werner reads it twice. Sir, this can't be. Legal? Donitz finishes. Technically it is. International law requires us to ensure the safety of survivors if possible, but it doesn't define, if possible. And I've defined it as, never possible, for tactical reasons. Can't court-martial me for that. They might try at Nuremberg if we lose this war, but that's a problem for a different day. But the survivors will die, Donitz says flatly. They'll die in the water because their own side taught us that mercy gets punished. You tried to do the right thing, Hartenstein. You followed your conscience. And the direct result is that thousands of people who might have been rescued by other U-boats will now drown because I can't allow my commanders to take the risks you took. Do you understand? Your compassion killed more people than your torpedo ever could. That's the truth of what happened. That's what you actually accomplished. Silence fills the office. Werner processes this, tries to find an argument, a counterpoint, anything that makes it not his fault. But the logic is airtight. He revealed his position. British planes attacked. Donitz issued the order. Future survivors will die. Cause and effect, as clear as mathematics. He wants to argue that the British pilot was the one who attacked, that Donitz is the one who issued the order, that he can't be responsible for other people's decisions. But he knows it's not that simple. His action created the situation. Others responded. People will die because of the chain reaction he started. Isn't that how responsibility actually works? You're not being court-martialed, Donitz continues. Officially, your rescue operation was a reasonable response to discovering Italian allies in the water. Officially, you showed initiative and humanitarian concern. Officially, you're getting a commendation for exceptional seamanship under difficult circumstances. The propaganda ministry loves the story, German officer risks everything to save Italian allies. Very good for morale, very good for our alliance with Italy. So publicly, you're a hero. Werner waits for the other shoe to drop. Privately, Donitz says, you will never command a submarine again. You'll be reassigned to training duty, shore positions, administrative roles, important work, necessary work, but never at sea. Because I can't trust you to follow orders when they conflict with your conscience. And in submarine warfare, that makes you a liability no matter how skilled you are. Do you accept these terms? What choice does he have? Werner nods. Good. Dismissed. Your crew will remain with you, 156 under a new commander. You have 48 hours to pack your things. Donitz returns to his paperwork, conversation over, verdict delivered. Werner salutes, turns to leave, hand on the doorknob when Donitz speaks again, quieter this time. For what it's worth, Hartenstein, I would have done the same thing. I would have tried to save them. And I would have been wrong too. That's war. We're all wrong, just in different ways. Now get out of my office. Werner leaves Lorya 2 days later. His crew lines up to say goodbye, not the formal military goodbye, but real goodbye, with handshakes and embraces and the kind of eye contact that communicates everything words can't. They know what he did. They know what it cost. They're proud to have served under him, even if the official record will never quite capture what happened in those 48 hours in the mid-Atlantic. One sailor, Klaus, the one who grabbed the drowning Italian man's wrist, presses something into Werner's hand, a small carved wooden cross, made from a piece of the Laconia's debris that somehow ended up on U-156's deck. For remembering, Klaus says. Werner pockets it without speaking, because if he speaks he'll lose the composure he's been maintaining for days. He spends the rest of the war training new submarine crews, teaching them tactics and procedure and all the technical skills that make a good U-boat officer. But he never tells them about the Laconia. Not because he's ordered not to, though he is, but because he doesn't know what lesson to draw from it. Save people and cause more deaths. Follow your conscience and prove your superiors right about your unsuitability for command. Do the right thing and create the conditions for future wrong things. He can't frame it in a way that makes pedagogical sense, so he stays silent. His students learn to hunt ships, calculate firing solutions, survive depth charge attacks. They become competent officers. Some of them die in their first patrol. Some survive the entire war. None of them know that their instructor once tried to save 1,500 people and succeeded in dooming thousands more. The war ends. Germany surrenders. Werner survives, which is more than most U-boat commanders can say, 75% casualty rate among submarine crews, highest of any branch of service in any nation during the war. The Nuremberg trials begin. The Laconia order becomes evidence, proof that Germany systematically refused to rescue survivors, proof of war crimes, proof that Dönitz knew exactly what he was doing when he told his commanders to let people drown. But something strange happens during the proceedings. American submarine commanders testify that they followed identical practices in the Pacific, that they never rescued Japanese survivors, that the idea of submarine warfare with humanitarian exceptions is naive fantasy that no combatant actually practiced. The tribunal struggles with this. If everyone did it, can you prosecute one side for it? They convict Dönitz anyway, 10 years for war crimes, though the specific charge isn't the Laconia order but broader crimes of waging aggressive war. The testimony about submarine tactics gets buried in the broader verdict. History moves on. Werner testifies at the trial, called as a witness to explain what actually happened during the Laconia rescue. He describes the sinking, the rescue, the British attack, the consequences. The prosecutors ask if he thinks Dönitz's order was justified. Werner pauses, thinks about all the people who drowned after the order went into effect, thinks about the 771 people who survived because he ignored protocol, thinks about the impossible mathematics of trying to quantify which decision killed more people. Finally he says, I think everyone involved made rational decisions based on incomplete information. And I think those rational decisions created a system where the only winning move was not to play. But we were in a war. We had to play. We all did the best we could with terrible options. It's a non-answer that satisfies nobody, but it's the truth as Werner understands it. Decades pass. Werner never writes a memoir. He refuses interviews. He keeps the wooden cross Klaus gave him in a drawer, takes it out occasionally to remind himself that once, for 48 hours, he tried to make the war stop being a war. It didn't work. Maybe it was never going to work. But he tried. Isn't that worth something? He doesn't know. He's still not sure when he dies in 1986, at age 77, having spent 44 years thinking about 48 hours that defined everything that came after, but the story doesn't end with Werner's death. Because history has a way of revealing layers that participants couldn't see. In the 1990s, researchers start examining the Laconia incident more closely, cross-referencing German records with British archives with Italian survivor testimonies. They discover something Werner never knew, something that would have changed how he understood everything. The British pilot who tried to bomb U-156. He filed a report after the attack, recently declassified. In it, he explains his decision, observed German submarine apparently conducting rescue operations. Visible survivors on deck. Red Cross flag displayed. Commanded to attack regardless. Dropped depth charges off target to comply with orders while minimizing casualties. Request this incident be reviewed for humanitarian considerations. The pilot deliberately missed. He followed orders technically but violated them in spirit, trying to thread the same impossible needle Werner tried to thread. And his request for review was denied, stamped, no further action, filed away and forgotten. Two men, enemies by circumstance, both trying to inject humanity into inhuman situations, both punished for it in different ways, neither knowing the other existed. The researchers published this finding in a 1997 paper, Parallel Acts of Mercy During the Laconia Incident, a case study in individual ethics during wartime. It gets approximately 247 citations, mostly in academic journals nobody reads, and then fades back into obscurity. But there's more. In 2005, a film crew tracks down survivors of the Laconia sinking, elderly now, in their 80s and 90s, scattered across Italy, Britain, and South America. They interview them, ask what they remember. One survivor, Maria Conti, was 7 years old when the Laconia sank. She remembers almost nothing about the ship, the torpedo, the chaos. What she remembers vividly, with perfect clarity, is this: a German sailor gave me chocolate. I was in the water, so cold, so scared, and this German sailor on the submarine reached down and gave me a piece of chocolate and told me in bad Italian that I was going to be okay. I didn't know if I believed him. But I ate the chocolate, and it was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted, and I decided that anyone who would give a strange child chocolate in the middle of drowning must be telling the truth. So I stopped panicking. I held on. And he was right, I was okay. I survived. I had children, grandchildren, a whole life, all because one German sailor gave me chocolate and I chose to believe him. The film crew asks if she knows the sailor's name. She doesn't. They ask if she'd recognize him if she saw his picture. She's not sure, it was dark, she was 7, everything was chaos. But she has this memory, crystallized and perfect, of a moment of kindness in the worst night of her life. The documentary uses her testimony as its emotional center, The War That Stopped, the Laconia Incident. It airs on BBC Two, gets decent reviews, wins a minor award at a documentary festival. 300,000 people watch it. Then it disappears into the vast archive of historical documentaries that people appreciate but don't remember. But Maria Conti's testimony gets posted on YouTube. It accumulates views slowly, a few thousand per year, people stumbling across it while researching WW2, or submarine warfare, or acts of mercy during conflict. Comments appear below the video. This made me cry. Why didn't they teach us this in school? Imagine being that German sailor and never knowing you saved this woman's entire life. War is so much more complicated than movies make it seem. The comments keep coming, year after year, a slow-motion conversation between strangers about what it means to be human when everything encourages you to be something less. And gradually, very gradually, the Laconia incident stops being a footnote and becomes a reference point, a story people tell when they want to illustrate the complexity of moral choice, the impossibility of perfect decisions, the way good intentions can have terrible consequences and terrible situations can produce unexpected heroism. It becomes the kind of story that gets mentioned in ethics classes, in military academies, in discussions about international law and the rules of war. Not constantly. Not famously. But consistently. A story that refuses to be completely forgotten because it asks questions nobody wants to answer but everybody needs to think about. In 2012, a memorial is dedicated at Lorient, France, the same U-boat base where Werner received his verdict from Donat 70 years earlier. The memorial is simple, a bronze plaque listing all the submarines that operated from Lorient during the war, including U-156. At the bottom, there's an additional inscription, remember not only those who fought, but those who chose mercy when mercy was forbidden. Their actions haunt us still, as they should. Survivors of the Laconia attend the ceremony, only 4 still living by this point, all in their 80s, all grateful to be remembered. One of them is Maria Conti, now 77 years old, exactly Werner's age when he died. She's asked to speak. She stands at the podium, looks at the crowd, and says something that becomes the most quoted line from the entire event. I don't know if what happened that night was good or bad. I don't know if Commander Hartenstein made the right decision or the wrong one. But I know that when he had the power to let me die, he chose not to. And I know that I've spent 70 years being grateful for that choice, even while understanding all the ways it went wrong. Maybe that's all we can ask of anyone in war, that when they have the power to increase suffering, they try, however imperfectly, to decrease it instead. The results might be terrible. But trying matters. It has to matter. Because if it doesn't, what's left? The speech gets polite applause. Local news covers it briefly. Then everyone goes home, and life continues, and the memorial joins the thousands of other memorials scattered across Europe commemorating things that should never be forgotten and yet somehow always are. But Maria Conti's question remains, floating in the air like a ghost, does trying matter if the results are terrible? Can intention outweigh outcome? Should it? Here's what the historical record shows. After the Laconia order, U-boats stopped attempting rescues. Survivors of torpedoed ships died in the water at significantly higher rates. Exact numbers are impossible to calculate, but estimates suggest the Laconia order contributed to at least 5,000 additional deaths among Allied sailors and civilian passengers over the remaining 3 years of the war. Werner Hartenstein saved 771 people and indirectly caused the deaths of 5,000 others. The mathematics are brutal and clear. But here's what the historical record doesn't show: how many U-boat crews, before the Laconia order, saw survivors in the water and chose to help because they thought it was the right thing to do? How many British or American bomber pilots saw rescue operations and chose not to attack? How many small mercies happened in the chaos of war, unrecorded because nobody thought to write them down? And how many of those mercies stopped happening after the Laconia incident, not because of official orders but because people learned the lesson Werner learned: compassion gets punished, mercy gets exploited, trying to be human in an inhuman situation just makes everything worse. That number, the mercy that vanished from the war because the Laconia incident taught people that mercy was dangerous, that number is incalculable. But it's not zero. Wars change how people behave, and the Laconia incident changed the war. It taught everyone involved that the rules forbidding mercy weren't just suggestions, they were pragmatic survival strategies. Break those rules and people die, including you and everyone you're trying to save. Follow those rules and people die, but at least you survive to fight another day. Which is the better choice? Neither. Both. The question itself is broken because the situation is broken. Werner spent 44 years trying to answer it and never found a satisfactory response, but maybe, the point isn't to find a satisfactory response. Maybe the point is to keep asking the question, to keep being haunted by it, to keep feeling the weight of impossible choices even decades after those choices stop being relevant to anyone's daily life. Because the alternative is to stop feeling that weight, to accept that in certain situations humans just kill each other and that's that. Nothing to be done, no point in trying to inject mercy or compassion or basic humanity into circumstances that don't reward those qualities. And if we accept that, if we let the Laconia incident teach us that trying is pointless, then Werner's 44 years of anguish were wasted. But if we reject that, if we insist that trying matters even when it fails, then maybe his anguish served a purpose. Not a satisfying purpose. Not a purpose that makes everything okay. But a purpose nonetheless, reminding us that we're supposed to feel terrible about this stuff, that moral injury is the price of remaining human in situations designed to make us something less. So what do we do with this story? How do we metabolize a tale where the hero does the right thing and creates more evil as a result? The easy answer is to say Werner was naive, that he should have followed orders, that submarine warfare has rules for good reasons and personal conscience is a luxury nobody can afford in combat. That answer is easy because it removes the burden of choice. Just follow the rules. Don't think too hard about consequences. Do your job and let someone else worry about the ethics. It's an attractive answer precisely because it requires nothing from us except obedience. But that answer has a body count. Following the rules means letting 1,500 people drown without even trying to help. It means accepting that some deaths are administratively convenient, that some lives matter less than maintaining tactical advantage, that the categories we create, enemy, prisoner, civilian, combatant, are more real than the actual humans drowning in front of us. Werner couldn't accept that. He looked at people dying and decided that their humanity mattered more than the categories, more than the rules, more than his own safety. He was wrong about the consequences. He didn't foresee how his mercy would be punished, how that punishment would cascade into policy changes that killed thousands. But he wasn't wrong about the basic premise: those people were human beings who deserved attempts at rescue. That part was right. Tragically, devastatingly, but correctly right. The hard answer is to accept that sometimes there are no good options, only less bad ones, and even identifying which option is less bad requires information nobody has in the moment. Werner made his choice based on what he could see: people drowning. He couldn't see the future policy changes, the increased casualties, the long-term costs. Should we judge him for that? Should he have predicted that mercy would be punished? Maybe. But also maybe not. Maybe expecting people to perfectly forecast the butterfly effects of their ethical decisions is asking for a level of omniscience that humans don't possess. We make choices based on incomplete information, and then we live with the consequences, and sometimes the consequences are worse than the original problem. That's not unique to war. That's life. The difference is that in war, the consequences kill people in quantifiable numbers, and we can do the mathematics afterward and prove that yes, this decision was objectively worse than that decision. But the people making the decisions didn't have the luxury of mathematics. They had moments, seconds, instincts, values. And they chose based on whatever combination of those factors seemed right at the time. Here's what the Laconia Incident actually teaches us: systems that punish mercy inevitably become systems that destroy themselves. Think about it. The British pilot attacked a rescue operation, which prompted Germany to forbid rescue operations, which meant Allied sailors drowned, which meant the war became slightly more brutal, which meant the next generation of soldiers learned that mercy is weakness, which meant post-war conflicts continued the escalation, which meant the chain keeps going. Every decision to punish compassion teaches the next person that compassion is dangerous. And gradually, generation by generation, conflict by conflict, we build societies where compassion genuinely becomes dangerous because we've constructed rules that make it so. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We create the world we fear, but there's a countercurrent, equally important: people like Werner keep trying anyway. The pilot who deliberately missed. The French captains who sailed into danger to rescue survivors. Klaus, the German sailor who almost fell overboard grabbing an Italian man's wrist. Maria Conti's chocolate-giving sailor whose name we'll never know. These moments of attempted mercy don't erase the systematic cruelty, don't balance the ledger, don't make the outcome okay. But they prove something essential: that humans can recognize suffering and try to reduce it even when every incentive structure says not to. That's not naive. That's not weakness. That's the thing that makes us worth preserving as a species. The capacity to look at a rule that says, let them die, and think, but what if I don't? Werner Hartenstein died thinking he'd failed. And by one measure, the mathematical measure of lives saved versus lives indirectly cost, he did fail. Catastrophically. But by another measure, he succeeded at something harder: maintaining his humanity in circumstances specifically designed to destroy it. He saw people who were technically enemies, technically prisoners, technically not his problem, and he treated them like people anyway. For 48 hours, he made the war stop being about nations and categories and start being about humans helping humans. That it didn't last doesn't mean it didn't matter. That it had terrible consequences doesn't mean it was pointless. It means exactly what Maria Conti said 70 years later: trying matters, even when failing is guaranteed, because the alternative is not trying. And not trying means accepting that in certain situations, we're okay with being monsters. And if we accept that, what's left? The Laconia Incident haunts us because it should. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. It's supposed to make us question our assumptions about rules and mercy and the relationship between individual actions and systemic outcomes. It's supposed to make us think about whether we'd have the courage to do what Werner did, and whether having that courage would make us heroes or fools or both simultaneously. These aren't questions with clean answers. They're questions designed to make us better people through the asking, not through any answer we might discover. So here's the question you need to answer: if you were Werner Hartenstein, standing on that conning tower at 2:07 a.m., staring at 1,500 people drowning because of your perfectly executed attack, would you dive? Would you follow the rules, preserve your crew, maintain tactical advantage, and let them die? Or would you surface, broadcast your position, risk everything, and try to save them knowing that trying might create worse outcomes down the line? You don't get to know the consequences before choosing. You only get the moment, the screaming, and your conscience. What do you do? Think about that. Sit with it. Let it make you uncomfortable. Because comfort is the enemy of moral growth, and this story exists to deny you comfort. And if you think Werner's choice was impossible, wait until you hear about the bridge at Remagen, where one American sergeant faced an even more impossible decision: detonate the last bridge across the Rhine and trap 75,000 German soldiers for capture, or preserve it for Allied use, knowing those same 75,000 soldiers would escape to kill Allied troops later. He had 30 seconds to choose. What he decided changed the entire endgame of World War II. And just like Werner, he spent the rest of his life wondering if he chose right. But that's a story for another time.